So I just wanted to, I'm actually going to go through a lot of our nutritional intervention as part of a case study. I thought I'll just kind of tick off the things that we do before we do that. So obviously as dietitians, the first thing we do before we see anybody is look at their nutritional status. What's their height? What's their weight? What do their bloods look like? What's their medical condition like? What's their weight history? Lots and lots of questions, and I'm sure similar as you as speech pathologists, we need to get a really good history. We need to look at nutritional requirements, so we've already looked at that today and just saw how by modifying those diets, the nutritional requirements and meeting their recommended intakes just falls more and more. We're looking at things like fluid. I'm sure you'll agree, people who need modified fluids, fluid intake is hugely problematic. It's really difficult to get people to have enough fluid. But it's much, much better than it used to be. Years ago, the products were dreadful, but we've got really quite good products on the market now. We're not trying to thicken up with corn flour or anything like that anymore. So the products are good, but fluid intake can be really problematic. I did an assessment probably just yesterday or the day before with a speech pathologist, and we saw somebody who was really undernourished with a really poor fluid intake, and we were just trying to work out between us just how much they were on little pots of thickened fluid, just how much fluid they could manage, and it was probably, I don't know, less than 500 mils a day was all that they were having, and we're seeing that all the time. Talk about things like, is food fortification appropriate? So we tend to, if we put somebody onto certainly a minced and moist diet, we tend to then say, moisten it with cheese sauce, moisten it with sauces and gravies and things that actually, if somebody's eating well, they have a lot of calories. We changed menus quite a few years ago in one of our group homes, and everybody who lived there had, they had quite a good appetite, and the staff were giving everybody quite big portion sizes, so they'd have whatever their main course was, and their vegetables, they'd be having like cauliflower cheese with that, or broccoli and cheese sauce, and everybody put on loads of weight. So we had to sort of say, oh, just be careful, don't fortify it as much, don't give such big portions. But if you think about it, if your appetite's really good and you go onto a minced and moist diet, you might be used to be having like a breast of chicken, a jacket potato and a big salad. You can't have that salad anymore. Instead, you have cauliflower cheese. So for some people with good appetites, we've actually got to think, is food fortification appropriate? And I think that's when we can see a great role for just being more inventive with our vegetables, more inventive with our moulds and our powders, and how can we actually introduce more fruit and veg into the diet for people so they can still have a really healthy diet and actually not gain too much weight on a modified consistency diet either. That's probably the exception. We usually see people who are more malnourished, but it's just to be aware that can happen. And I guess as dietitians, we would look at people's diets individually and decide whether that could be problematic for them. You usually know by somebody's appetite as well. It's often hard for group home staff to gauge because they're quite compact diets. Like a minced and moist diet can be actually quite compact. So by the time you've put a couple of spoons on it, it's like a couple of spoons of quite a lot of nutrients, which can build up over a period of time. I mean, it was great. They'd all gained weight, but everybody had really enjoyed the food, so it was trying to balance it out, to be honest. So food fortification isn't always appropriate, so we just can't say whenever somebody's diet's modified, we just need to whack in the cheese and the cream, because we don't always. But again, it's a lot of education for staff to be able to, staff, if somebody's on a soft diet, but they could still maybe have some soft tomato, or, we could do something that looked a little bit more salad-like. It's really scary when people aren't cooks to have to do that. So it takes so much training to try and get, when people are just getting their head around a modified consistency diet and how these consistencies look, it takes so much training to then go to the next step and say, now we want you to be really inventive with vegetables, and we want you to sort of do even more cooking so we can make these diets as good as we can for people. You really need to have people there who are keen and good cooks to do that as well. Nutritional supplements. I've deliberately not talked too much about supplements today because, again, it could be a lecture on its own. again, it's looking at that diet, and you would see by the graphs that I showed you, looking at where the nutrients lie, looking at somebody's appetite, and deciding whether nutritional supplements were appropriate or not. They do have to be used with a plan. They have to be used with quite specific quantities, and we have to see what's happened to their usage over a period of time. When I worked in the UK, we had a few projects on the go just looking at the use of nutritional supplements, and I think that was because in the UK, nutritional supplements come from the GP's budget. Certainly where I worked, they did. They were free to the person, but they came off the GP's budget. So in some places, they were just using nutritional supplements all the time, and the GPs weren't very happy because their budgets were huge because it was just an overuse. So I think wherever we can, we need to use normal food, and we need to, just use everyday product. And I think if nutritional supplements need to be used, then they really need to be used with a very, very clear plan as to their usage. And it really needs to be, it's quite strategic. From our point of view, we would look at somebody's diet and say it's deficient in this. This is the supplement that would meet that need, and that tends to be the way that we work it. But I'm happy to answer questions on them. I just haven't gone into them too much today. Multivitamins and minerals, again, if we look at certainly the minced moist and the puree diet, they do have a place in modified consistency diets. Probably most people on a puree diet, really, I could say, could be doing with a multivitamin. And again, it's looking for advice on the type of vitamins that we're going to use. Do we need just a vitamin C supplement? Do we need a multivitamin? And which one can we use that's safe? Because there's not a huge number of really good powdered products out there as well if people are on modified consistency diets. So again, it's a subject in itself. So just from a dietetic point of view, that's very much what we're looking at, and it's something we all need to look in together. It's not something we can just do solely on our own either. So some of the training requirements within the project. So the project was really working along with the mealtime management plan project that was going on at the same time. And we prioritised, or the speech pathologists prioritised some group homes that they felt really needed additional dietetic intervention. So they would go out, they would actually reassess that person, reassess and re-look at their mealtime management plan. And if they felt that there was a lot of people within that group home who had different consistencies and that perhaps the group home staff were struggling, they would then refer them on to what we call the nutrition project. And as part of the nutrition project, I would go out with the speech pathologist. We would do training and education within that group home to try and promote a more consistent and a better quality modified consistency diet for the group home. We just kind of found that the mealtime management plans were going out, and there was still another little part in the puzzle, because quite often staff didn't know what to cook. They'd go, well, that's great because you're on a puree diet. I actually don't know what I'm supposed to give you for dinner because we're all having chicken schnitzel. That stuff was going on quite a lot, and it was just really to try and meet the needs of the last part of the puzzle, really, if you like. Okay, it was also a really good project for us all to work in together. So from a kind of, going to work and working as part of a team and working as part of a team within that group home, it was a really rewarding piece of work. Okay, so an example, and this is just the question that I was asked earlier. So in a group home, we could have one person on a minced moist diet, one person on a soft diet, one person has diabetes and one person has celiac disease. 3 of the people were of normal weight, but the person with diabetes had a tendency to gain weight. And the group home staff, as I would, everybody would say, oh my goodness, what do we cook for dinner tonight? Because everybody has such different needs. So some of the issues and barriers we came across were really the staff working within the group home had varied cooking skills, from the keen cook to somebody really who had very little interest, which is absolutely fair enough. They found it really hard to cook for people with different likes and dislikes, because the thing is, people still, amongst all these diets, we still have to make sure people get their favourite foods and things that they like and things that they want to eat, because that's what we do. There was sort of time issues as well. This was took a long time to go through the education and the planning. there was different feelings that some of this group home staff had about why people needed to follow these diets in the first place. So we really had to try and overcome this barrier, because people would say, well, do you know what? I eat pizza. It's their right to eat pizza as well. Why are you stopping them from doing this? And that really takes that kind of joint education from a dietitian and a speech pathologist to do that. And there was just sort of a lack of understanding regarding the different categories of modified consistency and food choice. So we'd sometimes say, oh, what have you got for your mince moist diet tomorrow night? And they'd say, oh, grab it out of the freezer. So they'd bring it out of the freezer and defrost it. And then we'd have a look. And it might be something like a stir fry that had just been pulsed. So it would still have like hard bits of onion in it and hard bits of other things. And then when you actually showed people what the consistency should be like, and they'd look and they'd go, oh no, we'll make something different, this is terrible. So it was just taking each group home as an individual, really, and just looking at what their specific problems were with their specific diets. Okay. We also had quite incomplete menu plans. So this is maybe what I would have from a group home. If we were to say, what do people have to eat, this would be it. So we wouldn't know the veg. It's fair enough, because we can't. I could never plan the vegetables I was going to have for every night of the week. It's impossible, because it's seasonal and things can change. We'd have foods like, sweet and sour pork, and we'd have rice and chicken schnitzel and all of these things that we then say, well, what do you give to that person on the minced and moist diet? And people really wouldn't be very sure. So that was the kind of sample menus that we were coming up against. And fair enough, I have to think about myself at home. If I could come up with a menu as to what we were going to eat for every night of the week, I'd be feeling quite pleased with myself. It's hard work. It's really hard to do that. And they're not just looking after food with the people they're caring for, they're looking after everything else as well. So it does become really difficult. And I think we went out with an understanding of it was hard for people. Okay, so that would be the sample menu. We'd then make sure that the mealtime management plans were updated. So look at the dietary and nutritional status of the clients. Just look at that we are being really person-centred, that people are getting the foods that they actually like to eat, that we're not giving anybody foods that they don't like. We can have perfect menus, but if it doesn't include anybody's favourites, or if it's foods that people don't actually like, then there's no point in having that in the first place. So what were the clients' likes and dislikes and food preferences? And what were house routines with regard to things like shopping, times to eat? Did we have different weekend routines? We had what were the cooking skills like? Which recipe books did you use? And what about eating out was a huge issue. Restrictions in practice and what would we do about eating out was a really sort of big discussion in a lot of group homes. So once we'd looked at all of that, and we had we'd have sample menus, we'd go to and fro, and it was just quite a big process. This looks really complex, but it's not. We would then end up with something like this that was an improved menu. So you'd have your basic food on it. We'd then have choices and just things that people had to remember if they were on a minced and moist diet, and things they had to remember if they were on a soft diet. And I actually ran out of space, so I couldn't put the choices for the gluten-free and the people with the person with diabetes. We'd then think about what do you need to do to make sure that's gluten-free for the person with celiac disease, and what do you need to do to make sure that's okay for the person with diabetes. So each group home had a very sort of individual menu plan that covered all of these aspects. Some people would just have a soft diet, so we would just put some soft choices down and see. But it was just the reminders of the guidelines and the reminders as to what people needed to be looking for. We'd also come up with plans in some of the group homes. So some of the staff who were maybe the keen cooks would say, oh look, I'll cook a big chicken casserole and we'll put that in the freezer, so when everybody else is having chicken schnitzel, then those other people can have chicken casserole. So we would do that, and we would kind of employ the people that were keen to do a lot of the cooking. So on some nights they would actually have a plan, they would have stuff in the freezer they could take out, so they didn't have to cook from scratch. Because I think if I had to come in and cook 5 different dinners from scratch, I think that is just really hard work, and that's when mistakes happen as well. Okay, so we also had to do things, if I keep talking about chicken schnitzel, but if it was chicken schnitzel, we could just do that with gluten-free breadcrumbs, then that would do the other people, and the person with celiac disease could have it. So it was just doing those individual plans for each group home. So along with that, we actually put a training package together. We had to give them information for suitable foods for breakfasts and lunches and snacks, modified fluid information, and we also developed a recipe book which had a range of recipes in it just to help the staff who maybe couldn't cook as well, just to get their head around this idea behind a modified consistency diet. And the speech pathologists also came up with the squish test so that we weren't so reliant on recipes, because you know what it's like, you can cook a beef casserole for 10 hours and it can still be tough. So it was very much educating staff on, does it squish? You know, is it all right? Make your own decisions about consistency. That was kind of our next plan, our next step, to help staff to make their own decisions about consistency as well. Okay. So I sort of put together a recipe book, which I have to say nearly killed me. It was just the most time-consuming piece of work. But we'd be trying to keep people safe, because these people are our responsibility. We need to keep them safe. So if it was something like a chicken curry, we would take out huge amounts of onion, because there was already lots of flavour there, and we just didn't want to put anything in that maybe people wouldn't cook properly and could be at risk. We would advise within it that maybe cook with things like skinless and boneless chicken thighs, because there's a higher fat content and they're actually much easier if it comes to mashing them. And the same with your beef casseroles and things. We don't want visible fat, but use something that's got a little bit of fat throughout it, because then it tends to be a much nicer product at the end. We talked about thickening with things like lentils, but making sure they're properly cooked. And we also had recipes that had things like yogurt and coconut milk in them, and just foods that we were just getting away from the white sauce and the cheese sauce and things. Within each recipe, we also had ideas at the bottom as to how we modify for a soft diet, minced moist and a smooth puree diet. So that was kind of our educational tool to give to the group homes as well.